All right, good morning, everyone. Let's start finding our seats so that we can try to close the gap in our lost time earlier today due to some technical difficulties, which is fitting for a room full of technical experts. So, and as people start making their way in, a quick reminder: I'm seeing a couple of new faces in the crowd. If you have not done so, please make sure you check in with our teammate, Mr. Randall, Miss Karen, in the very back of the room. We're trying to help keep attendance, or at least those that participated that are here in the room. So help us keep you informed. We got a couple of presentations here this afternoon, or this morning still, uh, focusing to SRF. So our Don CIO team is going to go ahead and dive into some of the things on SRF, and I will start making the announcement that during the lunch break, our SRF financial team will be out to be able to go ahead and deep dive to any financial questions that you might have. So we will continue to advertise it, but that's the opportunity for you to truly pull them aside and say, what can I do, what can I not do, and all the policies and regulations. That is your time. So with further ado, Mr. Lamar Woods and Ms. Elvira Pierce. A little later, okay? And before Lamar comes over, virtual line, can I get a mic check, make sure everything's working? Okay, getting some thumbs up on the back. So, Lamar?
All right. So I got a clicker here. Okay. All right. Good morning, everyone. Lamar Woods here with the Don CIO. Today I'm going to be talking about tactical targeting network technology and the coexistence testing. I gave this brief a couple times at the summit, but I'm going to give an update from the progress that we've made, and specifically the testing with ENG, electronic news gathering, and their BAS service. So here's the agenda here. I'm going to quickly just talk about the overview. This is a part of the Advanced Wireless Services 3 auction. This was a system, a part of that auction. We'll talk about the live flight testing that we did, and then we'll talk about the coordination efforts that have been going on between the Navy and the broadcasters. So quick overview, TTNT, the system, it is a tactical data link, and it transports large amounts of data through IP and non-IP formats. It's a mesh network, scalable network, and the nodes can be land, sea, and air. But specifically here, we're going to be focusing on the SRF efforts for 3 platforms. As you can see here, the E18G, the E2D, and the 18EF. We tested 2 aircraft, which was the C-12 and the 18G. The C-12 is a Air Force platform. They also operate TTNT. The capabilities that TTNT provides, it uses L and S-band. It's an omnidirectional antenna. It has low latency, agile, robust resilience, and anti-jam performance. And it's a frequency hopper, and it has a dynamic power control and data rate management. So this system is kind of I would say, a next-gen system. It has all of the capabilities that a warfighter would need to communicate. And this waveform was originally started, it was a DARPA waveform, and then it transitioned to a program of record with the JTRS MIDS terminal. And at the time of the AWS-3 auction, it was still a prototype, and that's kind of where sort of the issue lies here is the spectrum was auctioned off, and it was a prototype at the time. So part of the transition plan for TTNT was it operated 2 channels in 1755 to 1780 megahertz, and we vacated, or essentially just gave those 2 channels up to industry, and we truncated up to 1780 to 1850 megahertz. And then we gained access to 2025 to 2110 megahertz as part of U.S. Footnote 92, which established military operations in S-band. We did have some success in S-band, small UAS, and TRR, and those systems are operating in 2025, 2110. TTNT was the last system to transition into the band because of the how complex it is and the security classification. So, how we got to the live flight testing is we did paper analysis, we did some lab testing, and it got to the point where clearly the lab test and the paper analysis shows that TTNT cannot operate in the same spectrum as the broadcasters. They have, in 2025, 2110, they have 7 channels. And essentially, to get back 2 channels for TTNT, we would take up 40% of their spectrum band. So last year in July, we conducted a live flight testing just to confirm or refute the analysis and lab tests that we did. So if you look at this picture here, this is the ENG receiver main beam. So the red lines, the dark, bold red lines, that is the ENG receiver at the Reno, Nevada area market, and the yellow areas is the fallen training range, and those are restricted airspace. And what we did was we pointed the ENG receiver directly at the Fallon training range. And how we got to Fallon, or why we tested at Fallon, is because that market area is not as populated as some of the coastal areas in Southern California and the East Coast. So slide. So this is talking a little bit more about the schedule for our tests. We had scheduled 4 flights in 2 days. Our main beam test, which was our primary focus, that was done in the morning, and we canceled the afternoon flights, which were our side load tests. So we wanted to test side load 40 and side load 20 of the ENG receiver, but that didn't happen. During the test, we transmitted a continuous file in a loop at the studio, at the ENG studio, and whenever we saw degradation, we captured that as pixelation, which would be orange color, or red when the video completely went down, and that is what we consider harmful interference to ENG. So this is just a visual representation of our TTNT transmitter against the ENG receiver, and the picture on the left, this is co-channel. So this is when our TTNT transmitter and the ENG receiver are on top of each other. So that would be your worst case scenario, and we transmitted TTNT at 3 power levels. And so this is just a visualization of medium power. And if you see the red there, that shows that in the co-channel configuration, we would cause harmful interference to ENG's receiver up to a certain standoff distance. And so the green means good. So we didn't cause harmful interference to the ENG receiver. The picture on the right, that is non-co-channel. So that's when our TTNT channel is not overlapping the ENG channel, and you can see that there is more opportunity there where we don't cause harmful interference. So I would say the conclusion that we came up with from this test is that TTNT has significant restrictions in output power and distance separation from the ENG receiver. So essentially, in this scenario, and this is just a representation of real operations, TTNT would have to reduce its power and then it have to have a standoff distance from the ENG receiver, which we didn't have before. And so this is where the issue lies. And now that we have real data and we've done the test, this kind of validates the lab test and the analysis that we already did. So this slide here, it gets into a little bit more technical details about the distance, the standoff distances, and then the co-channel versus non-co-channel configurations. So I'll slide. Here is the summary of the results here. And so the first table on the left, that is the C-12 aircraft. And so co-channel would be the ENG channel A6. As you can see, we transmitted TTNT at low, medium, and high power, and you can see the power levels there. And if you see that if you start at A6, which is co-channel, for low power we were green, so we could operate TTNT at low power, and in some instances medium power, but we could not operate at high power at any distance that was tested. And similar for the 18G, that's the table on the right, and the gray boxes are the configurations that we didn't test because we just assumed that it was green because we tested the C-12. The graphic on the bottom, that will show you what we consider co-channel. So the orange box there, that's co-channel. So you don't see TTNT's channel there because that's at a CUI level, but it'll be overlaid on A6, and then the green and then the yellow would be the non-co-channel configurations. So this just talks about the coordination that's been going on with the broadcasters. I came on board in March of 2023 to the Navy and picked up this project, and so it's been almost 2 years that we've been going at this. And I would say that we do have some wins through this campaign here, is that we do see that there is some light at the end of the tunnel where possibly ENG and the Navy could take some mitigations, and I think that's what we're working on now. But this slide here just talks about the coordination efforts that's been ongoing. And like I said before, the reason why we chose Fallon is because at the other locations where we want to get access to, which is China Lake, Pax River, those market areas are more populated, so they have more broadcasters that are broadcasting, and their channels are occupied. So that is a challenge. That is a challenge there. And I would say that I've been in contact with the TTNT program office for a while, and they've, on a daily basis or at least a weekly basis, they emphasize that they need access to S-band because they did give up those frequencies, and then also the other channels that they operate in L-band, there's other systems there too. So we have telemetry systems in upper L-band. We have safety of flight systems in 1300 to 1390, and we have DoD range systems in 1430 to 1450. So this is very important that the operators get access to this band, and we're trying to work through this. I will note that this is the unclassed version of this brief. I do have a longer brief that talks about our strategy and the next steps and how we make some progress. There is some mitigation efforts that the broadcasters can take on their side, and then also on our side that we're investigating now. So if you do want that brief or just more information, please reach out to me, and I can get you that information. Also, we did produce a test report, which was signed off by the broadcasters, which is SBE and NAB. So we can get you the test report if you wanted to get the full technical details for anybody that's interested. So that is my last slide. But I do have a question because I was kind of thinking about this. I do have a question for the crowd, the audience. And my question is, because I think this would help out us for other bands, and the question is, how did we get into this situation where TTNT cannot get access or get comparable capability? I wanted to ask that question to the crowd. Maybe we can have a couple people answer.
I can try. So possibly because my understanding it was used by like the sensor network. So very limited, I guess, use case. You know, and it wasn't even though it used very similar spectrum as the rest of the community, right? Because the capability was only used by very few entities. I think that's why maybe it just didn't have the advocacy it needed to be thrown into the loop with everything else that we need to support. For example, there's some of the land-based systems that the Marine Corps had, right? We received advocacy for this because it was day-to-day use, it was on land. My understanding of TTNT, and in my 20 years, I've only used it once, was used by air platforms, sometimes like near the coast or out in like in international waters. And that might be why it just never received the advocacy it needed, CONUS-wise, vice all the other capabilities, in my opinion.
Yep. That's a great answer. Okay. We have had exercises where we've got temps, but we haven't gotten any official frequency assignments approved yet through the FAS.
I'm trying to do it in Japan, so once I get it.
Yeah, so I'll take a shot at that question, and it kind of goes along with what you said. At the time of the auction, TTNT was still a prototype, so it was still a concept, and so it wasn't fully developed. We didn't know where exactly it was going to be deployed, and I think that we didn't do enough homework, or maybe analysis or lab tests before we decided to move this system into this band, because I think if we would have done that, it would have been pretty clear to an engineer that this system it'd be very complicated to operate in that band with electronic news gathering folks. So I just bring that point up because we do have other bands on the table, and we need to make sure we do our due diligence before we auction off these bands. Let's see, we have a question.
Sorry, I may have missed. What's the bandwidth of the system?
That's CUI, so I'll get with you offline.
Oh, cool. Anyway, whatever it is, that's a really congested band. I mean, there's tons of stuff that operates in that, but we sold off like the majority of it. So you have a very, very limited amount of frequencies in that range, and so much equipment that operates in it that trying to find where you could, and again, if your bandwidth is really, really wide, that's probably part of it too.
Yeah, that's exactly what it is. All right, no other questions. Thank you, appreciate it.
But also, just to add a additional note, is we are co-primary in the band. So go figure on that one. When you're co-primary, you should be equally unhappy, as Art says. So in moving forward, we have to be careful when we're repurposing on what co-primary means when we're trying to share. All righty? So, good morning. It's my second time up here today. Elvira Pierce. Flip to the next slide, please. Not me. That's not mine. Okay. Well, I could do it without it. But what I will speak about is two bands that we will have studies happening at the same darn time. So Rich spoke about it, the 3 gig to 78 gig, and then also joint staff, Dwayne spoke about it as well. So I'm gonna take a pause right there till the slides come up. Okay, so anyway, so what I'm going to give you is a high-level view, and I kindly ask that you go back to OpNav for additional information on how they will utilize their money to work on the 2 studies, and also Headquarters Marine Corps. Because what Don provides is the oversight, and they have oversight duties as well, but their money trickles down to the associated PMs. Okay. Okay, for the essence of time, I'm gonna still try to work without my slides. I mean, they were beautiful, so trust me on that. So we were notified, we used most of, I wanna say most of 2024, putting together a spectrum pipeline plan for 3 gig and 7 to 8 gigahertz. So that's something we've never done. 2 bands at the same time to see if we could repurpose. So that's going to be 2 studies going on at the same time. And I think Richie put up a slide yesterday that told you the equities in the band. So we were sent a format by NTIA, and we used that format to place in their activities. Are we getting close? Okay, so we had activities that we needed to study or be part of the study so that we can get to, can we share, right? So I think it's already been put out there what our boss, Ms. Rathbun, said, we're no longer looking at vacating. So we should figure out how to share. So if that's what my boss said, that's the message we're moving forward. Okay, so part of the spectrum pipeline plan, when we were notified that we needed to put the plan together, we realized that we're going to need some additional funding to do those things. So that's where we from the Department of the Navy, and all the other departments did the same thing. So it's not just the Department of the Navy putting together a plan for 3 gigs and 7 to 8 gig. It was all departments. So from there, we needed to request some funding to get the study off the ground and to pursue all the different activities that were laid out in 2 different plans. So just to pivot just a little bit. Now, Fumi was up here yesterday, and she spoke about how she needs a Don position on 7 to 8 gigs. So we should have our information, our report done, the study complete, so that Fumi can move out with work 2027, Fumi? So she can move out with the Don's position based on the final study that we're doing here at on the national level. Okay, so by the time they get the slides up, I'll be done. So, so we were given a top line, which means baseline still trickle down for the 3 gigs, so 3.1 to 3.5, 123 million. Now, our financial team is over here, and they will make sure it goes down to the prospective program offices to do the activities that I can't show you right now on the slide. So it's several activities. The program offices, based on the equities in the band, determine this is what we need at a minimum to get the studies done, and we have about 18 months to complete both studies and deliver a report that will be delivered to DOD. They will consolidate all the reports from all the departments and then funnel that back up with the DOD position, okay? So for the dynamic spectrum access part in the 3 gig, we're gonna receive 33 million. Now, DOD is the lead, not the departments. They're the lead for how that dynamic spectrum sharing, how we're going to study that. So you've probably heard some things about moonshots. I'm not going to get into that, but that's one of the activities we're trying to figure out what that will look like to see how we can share. So 33 million on that. So again, for all the bands that I'm mentioning, there's the oversight, there's the research, there's engineering, and then there's the testing, okay? For the 7 to 8 gig, the top line was 53 million. And all these numbers seem like a lot, but when you start purchasing people as a resource, you know, the equipment that's needed, that money goes fairly quickly, okay? So, all right. I can't show you that, so I gotta move away from the activity slide. Okay. We getting close? Okay. So, So we haven't received the funding yet. So I think everyone's aware based on the new administration. Well, look at here. I don't want to use that. I want someone to. I'm being a prima donna right now. I want to say next slide, since you guys did me like this. Okay. Okay. So I already spoke about this one. Next slide. So this is where I wanted you to really see the breakout of how the money will be spent. Again, top line. I'm not getting into the weeds on who that's going to, just that Headquarters Marine Corps determines who in their line would receive money, and also OPNAV, who in their line of the activities will receive the money as well. And again, the oversight, research, engineering, and testing. Okay. All right, next slide. So the one thing I did want to say, so as we're working through both the 7 to 8 gig and the 3 gig, there has been a group formed with academia, NTIA, the other federal agencies, which is called the Technical Interchange Groups, okay? So we're a part of that. We're all in the room. We're trying to figure out how this sharing, repurposing will work and the different type of testing events that will happen. So for the TIG, for the 3.1 to 3.45, there will be just one TIG group only. For the 7 to 8 gig, there will be 3 separate TIGs involved, the technical interchange groups. So one will be centered around microwave systems, one for terrestrial systems, and then one for satellites. So we will have different departments having their SMEs in the room to help us walk this out on what it will look like. So this is how the report, the SPP plan looked like, with money allocated to these different type of categories in the plan. And again, your perspective, OPNAV and Headquarters of the Marine Corps has it fully broken out how that money will look. But for this audience, I don't know if you need that right now, but no worries, no worries. Let's go to the next slide. Okay, so again, 33 million on the Don side to help work out the plan with DOD as a whole, with all the rest of the departments, on what this advanced dynamic spectrum sharing demonstration will look like. I know it's going to involve a moonshot, and I know we spoke earlier today, like, what is this thing that we're calling dynamic spectrum sharing? So as we work through this, we will begin to define what that looks like. So it's not just going to be conceptual, okay? Next slide. Okay, and then 7 to 8 gig again broke out that way. 2 separate packages went up with the same type of activities. different dollar amounts based on the equities in the band. Okay, next slide. Okay. I will ask if there's any questions. All right, come on, teammate. Yes, Miss Fumi.
Good morning. It's not a question, but then something to consider for the domestic study. From an international perspective, the vacate or the share did the same result. So that the U.S. going to support whatever the repurposing, that would be the U.S. position. So just for you guys to be aware, the vacate and the share did the same results at the WSC. Thank you.
So with that said, we have to take in consideration definitely what Fumi's saying. Even if that means Navy's out on the island by themselves, because we have to support what Fumi sees in work. And that's okay sometimes when you stand out away from the pack, because our equities are our equities, and we have to always protect our equities, whether it's national or international. All righty. Okay, well, Ms. Pierce is gonna depart from the stage, and I'm gonna tag in Mr. Dwayne Vandross. All right, thank you.
I had to wave at my teammates. Is industry in the room? Telecom industry. Serious question. Where you from? Poingo Wireless. Anybody else? All right. I can loosen up a little bit. Hey, my name is Dwayne L. Vandross. I want to get something out the way. Got to get some rumors out the way really quick. I'm not going to be before you long. I definitely have to do this. Really don't care if Art or Elvira gets mad at me. Got to dispel some things, right? Even came up last night. Number one, I am related to Luther Vandross. Loosen up, loosen up. Number two, I cannot sing. And number three, you can call me Luther. If we ain't that cool, after you keep calling me, I'm gonna ask you what's your favorite Luther song. All right? So, is this my clicker right here? We'll talk about Spectrum auction bands already, so one more thing. That was a great segue. 7, 8 gig, lower 3 gig, Spectrum pipeline plans, right? That means something potentially will happen. That something is an auction, right? Well, guess what? These bands, I'm a Tarantino this. These bands have already been auctioned, okay? We're talking about AWS-3 low, AWS-3 high, Seabirds, Citizens Broadband Radio Service, and 345, 355, the Ambit band, which is all of our favorite subject and band. Again, like I said, I want to Tarantino this with a tie-in here because I want to take advantage of something that really hasn't been pulled together for this group. Everybody's has already done my brief. That actually happens. Rich, Mark, it always happens. The surf bands always come up, right? Well, one thing that we haven't spoken about that ties all of this together is a transition plan. A transition plan. So with an auction comes a transition plan. So what is a transition plan, right? A transition plan is basically a package approved by NTIA OMB. It's a structured document that outlines the affected federal agencies' frequencies or systems, right? So It's a transition plan is comprised of systems that are impacted, the transition costs and funding needs to either share or vacate those frequency bands, and also risk mitigation strategies. Um, a transition plan that is approved again by the NTIA. It goes through a ROG on to the OMB, Office of Management and Budget. And once it's approved, we're able to receive those funds and begin that transition plan process. Another thing that ties all of this together, or one of the other common threads, and we've heard it, are auctions, right? So spectrum auctions have become really prevalent, right? And the race for 5G and driving the growth for our economy. So with all of that said, again, like I said, we'll kind of Tarantino this. I want to go back and forth, but these are the spectrum bands. Now, going backwards, we've all spoken about the SecNav instruction. SecNav instruction 2400 TAC 4 is the SURF guidance. So from those FCC rules, those coordination procedures, the public notice that come out after a frequency band has been auctioned, we have at the department guidance in how we are to use those SURF funds. So we heard roadshow, and I think Art Elvira will either be tagging along or doing our own roadshow for SURF guidance, because you have to be familiar with this process and understand how this impacts you at the unit or user level. But that's our guidance there. So going back, what's happening in all these bands, and this is the part where I won't be before you too much longer. I'm gonna go over some high-level wave tops here, and then proceed to take questions. And AWS 3 High, we auctioned, or we were kicked out of, no, excuse me, words matter. We agreed to vacate 1755, 1780 megahertz. We've already transitioned all of our frequency assignments. So if you go back to what is a transition plan, those systems that are impacted each frequency, in this band we've already vacated all of those frequency assignments, and all we have left is to execute. So we do have some transition plan updates, which is another buzzword, but we've already transitioned out of this band. You heard Lamar speak about TTNT. So when we say we transitioned out of this band, we either compressed up or we went to 1780 to 1855 or 2025 to 2110, and you heard some of the issues there. I would say overall, there's success stories through each of these bands, but as you'll see when I get to Ambit, we'll realize that spectrum sharing is actually quite difficult, especially when you come to the discussion of highly sensitive radar receivers, to be exact. AWS 3 Low is a little different, and I think we potentially could have some more action here. AWS 3 Low has been kind of quiet for the front office and for you as well. 1695, 1710, that's our meteorological, our METOC system, where our METOC system resides. And Dish, who's a licensee, commercial licensee, bought, I guess, the lion's share, or probably all of the licenses in this band. And this is a continued sharing band, but I think one of the high-level topics here, we have tools for each of these bands, which we coordinate with, and portals. This portal, the radio frequency coordination portal, which applies to this band, is the portal that's used to coordinate with industry, will sunset or go away. So that transition plan has an end of expenditure timeline. That end of expenditure for this portal is going away and sunsetting in FY 2025. So right now, the hottest topic here is what do we do when that portal is no longer available? So service levels and service level and service leads, you'll see a TMT come out, official tasker come out, and we've had these discussions. We built a nice diagram that the DoD's even used and allowed it, really communicating what the gaps will be when this portal goes away. So this is a service level requirement, and you'll see the tasker come out asking you those questions. What do we do when we lose this portal? So moving on, I'm going to go clockwise to your lower right there in the Citizens Broadband Radio Service. The high-level item here is, if you don't understand some of the acronyms, this isn't the brief for that. We have a brief for you, but this ecosystem is comprised of an ESC, and that ecosystem in the construct of DPAs and PDPAs, you have your CBSDs, and you have your SaaS operators. Again, this is not the brief to go into detail on that, but this is that ecosystem, and this protects our coastline, right? I think we've had, I know we've had a lot of success in this band and coordinating, and Mrs. Pierce has even received a letter of appreciation for all the efforts that all of you have helped with, especially our engineers, for successful coordination in this band. I would say that a lot of us would argue that we can't make too many more concessions. No good deed goes unpunished, but I think we have to be careful about what you see here, and I'm not going to go into detail about a 2-hour activation window and some of the ESC waivers. So the ESC waivers are for our natural disasters, and when I spoke about that ecosystem, whenever we show up, those CBSDs, which are the users, get kicked off that network. So we're working at how can we automate or move faster with those waivers, and we're also working at how can we reduce this 2-hour downtime where when they're told to get off or get out of the band, they have to wait 2 hours to come back up, and we're working with industry and our engineers to see how we can figure that out. Moving on to 345, 355. When we talk about this band, this is where we've experienced the most activity. This band, this auction generated $22 billion. Approximately $12 billion of that resides with the Navy. FXR is our biggest program that has approximately $12 billion. So this band has garnered a lot of senior leadership attention because it's been so difficult to share in this construct. We have a cooperative planning area and a periodic use area, which are basically coordination zones where we as the federal users are provided protection interference-free. I think the biggest issue here is the band. We all know that this mid-band is prime real estate for industry because of propagation, right? What we also didn't realize during our 15-week sprint for AMBIT, because there was no feasibility study done for this band, on how difficult this would be to actually share with these high-powered, high-sensitive radars. And we've done a lot of hard work. Look, I got some backup slides. I really only had 2 slides. I really had to figure out, hey, Art and Elvira asked, how are we gonna talk about the bands that have already been auctioned? So when I did that Tarantino, or that common thread there, the key terms are transition plan and auctions, right? But this is, if you look at these next 2 slides while I discuss all the hard work that's been done, these are the accomplishments, and these are some of our milestones of success stories that we've had since October of 22, when formal coordination began in this band. Again, I mentioned those other words, coordination procedures and public notice. What drives the coordination in this band is a tool, an electromagnetic capability analysis, right? So we have to have a tool to conduct those analyses. So what happens is a commercial provider sends a request, a coordination request, a CR, into the DoD, comes down to the Navy, and for those CPAs and PUAs that we are protected in, if they have licenses that they'd like to deploy, they have to go through an EMC analysis. We tell them how many of those coordination requests can either be approved or denied, and that ends in a results letter that we send back that they can either accept or request post 60-day discussions, which I'm not gonna go into detail on that because we've actually had a strategy to change the drumbeat and how often we have those discussions. We literally have been meeting with licensees every week since October 22 to discuss these coordination requests and their results. And we've changed that. We've taken a pivot respective to the law and the coordination procedures to make sure that we're talking about coordination request specific items that we can get after, because our engineers at B31 have done such a great job, as you can see. The last thing I'll talk about is the upcoming coexistence testing. So because it's been so difficult sharing, we decided to have a workshop back in April of 2022 with industry to get after how we could ease some of the stress that they've experienced in submitting their CRs and increase their approval rate. We agreed to do some field tests. We did 3 phases of those field tests at Stony Run in Baltimore, Washington area. And I think we came away with a lot of lessons learned. Not I know we came away with a lot of lessons learned. Won't go into the technical details to bore you, but we have had a lot of success. Under the direction of our director, we chose to have a joint field test where we kind of move away from being accommodating to just one licensee. During that Baltimore, Washington area field test, there was only one licensee involved, and we kind of lost some of the test controls, or kind of broke away from our test methodology and kind of started testing more towards how can we approve more licenses versus how do we understand 5G and how we can truly coexist with our radar. So what we'll do upcoming this summer is have a coexistence test where we try to learn a little bit more about how we can coexist and really direct licensees to sort of open up their trick bag and show us everything they can do so that we can get a better lessons learned and a better understanding of how to truly share and coexist. Going back, I think we went over some high-level wave tops here in each band. Again, these Spectrum bands have already been auctioned. So going back to that 7, 8 gig and that lower 3 gig discussion, we could potentially be having discussions like this for those bands. So it's very important that we understand what a transition plan is, how these auctions come to play, and I intend to get Elvira, Art, and Jason's consensus alignment on what David and Rich are doing, and sort of coming out on a road show to explain this process in detail with the help of our finance team, who will be of great assistance because it's really all about the money. Art.
So Dwayne, I just want to take this opportunity to mention something that's clearly been an issue when we designed the ambit auction capabilities, and realizing the Department of Navy received $12 billion, which is primarily tied to the program office, not oversight. And some of those key capabilities, as we looked at how do we do these testing design capabilities, we were never funded to do this level of testing. Those foundations were essentially designed at the back end after we completed our transition plans and integrate it into the NPRM capabilities. So those facets and capabilities are all being done out of Hyde, and we're on borrowed time right now because we're forward funding these requirements out of money that was already provided with the intent of hoping to get into a solution. But the reality is we were never given funding for this portion of the ambit testing, which is critical. Realizing equally unhappy is what we're looking for means that it benefits us and it benefits them, and there's going to have to be some compromise there.
Yeah, and I want to piggyback that as you think of your questions, and then I'll get off the stage. But I want to piggyback that with this. When we talk about sharing, we have to go back to the construct in which we share. And I think for this band, it's pertinent to say that we have been, by default, placed in an adversarial position. Why? I'm a licensee. I purchased my license. I expect to use it. Now, we go through that EMC analysis I talked about. You just formally told me that I cannot. Well, why can't you? Because I, DOD, Department of the Navy, have to protect my systems. And I've been afforded encumbered protection. Well, what does that mean? So we have two sides. We're about national security, homeland defense, DOD. I'm a licensee. I'm about economic growth. I'm about ROI. I'm about return on investment. I spent X amount of $1 billion. So just take that into account, and then that tells a story. We're both trying to do a job, and I think we've been doing an amazing one. And again, I applaud especially our engineers, but we've been working really hard. And if you want to get with me offline to discuss any one of those topics in depth, please do. I do want to give a big thank you to my co-pilot, my contract support, Jose, who's been running this whole thing administratively. Well, he's been in the battlefield with me and in our firing position, really, really doing some of the hard work. So thanks, Jose. If there's no more questions for me, that'll be all. Thank you.
No, hey, Dwayne and team, thank you much for the cheer. Definitely is a cheer, a sharing of Foxhole, so we'll keep it going. And I definitely want to thank you because administratively you help us get back on track. So thank you so much. So we'll be able to get back. So now here at 1100 NRL, so Mr. Joseph Molnar, hopefully I got it right. So he will take us here, no pressure, he will take us all the way to lunch. So, but nonetheless, a couple of reminders to make his way up here. The photos, we are gonna work on the slide, so please minimize on taking those snapshots. For the point of contact you're trying to get a hold of, hit him off to the side, but we'll definitely try to keep each other honest on there. So, further ado, thank you, sir.
So, first of all, let me just throw out some thoughts, and you'll think I'm crazy. So, there are an unlimited number of frequencies in the electromagnetic spectrum. That is in all space and time. Okay? And there are an unlimited number of receivers that can use the spectrum in all of that space. And there are an unlimited number of transmitters that can use the same spectrum at that same time. So why do we have a problem? It's because everyone wants to use it at the same place at the same time. And that's what contention is. And so, are we sharing yet? I mean, we had a discussion on dynamic spectrum sharing. I think I threw out the idea that there is dynamic spectrum sharing if you look at certain bands, you design Wi-Fi, works pretty well, Bluetooth. But you all are doing spectrum sharing all the time, right? You are specifically allocating a frequency at a specific location at a specific time. And you are doing that for all the systems that need to operate in that environment. So that is a form of spectrum sharing. Is that the way we want to do it in the future? No. We want to do it by being able to, on an instantaneous type time frame, like we use Wi-Fi, make selection of all our frequency usage for all frequencies, all bands. We are not there yet, okay? And why are we not there? Because there's risk associated with doing that, and we don't understand the risk. So, so why am I talking about risk? The AI that I'm talking about is primarily a project that was a startup Tranche 2 program. Earlier in the day, hopefully you were here for the Oscar presentation. Oscar was one of 3 Tranche 2 projects. So Oscar had a piece. RISA was another project. It was Risk-Informed Spectrum Access. And MICA is the third, the response piece. So I'll go into a little bit of overview on that, and then I'll talk about some of the AI techniques that were employed in RISA and still were viable and need to continue development. Okay, this is the overview. I'll give you the overview of Oscar RISA MICA, and then I'll talk about specifically the RISA AI techniques that we used. Okay, this is the overview of our ConOps. So this is basically a notional diagram of everything that is in the environment with Oscar, RISA, and MICA. And the status quo where we're at is sharing in which we do specific allocations of bands. And where we want to be is the Oscar approach where we're able to share specific bands, but it's dependent upon frequency, location, obstructions, and the risks associated with them. So if you think about it in the lower diagram, the bottom part is kind of these specific allocations. So if there's a red block that exists, well, then you can't use a blue block that's in that same band, right? But what we want to do is be able to use red and blue at the same time, and if there's interference, we want to mitigate that. But if there's no interference, the example is a mountain range in the way of the path, right? So you're not going to interfere if you can't have propagation across that mountain range. So this is the Oscar RISA MICA. Oscar does the things that Oscar does, basically spectrum management. It interfaces to the tools that are currently existing, the legacy tools. It brings them in and allows the spectrum allocations to occur. RISA is sitting there to do an analysis of those allocations. So the way I like to think of it is you have an exercise that's going to occur, and so one system comes in, they bring their request for allocations, it comes into Oscar, Oscar says, okay, that's good. Well, if you're the only system, there's no risk. The second system that comes in that wants to use those frequencies, all of a sudden you have risk, and so that needs to go over to RISA. I mean, in certain sense, you can allocate the same you can allocate a different band of the two systems, right? But say you want to use the same band. And it really doesn't become too complex until you start adding more and more, and there's no dedicated bands that can be allocated. So RISA is the one that says, let's figure out what the risks are and determine, do we allocate fewer frequencies to a particular system? Do we say, well, they can coexist in the same environment? They're operating at different times. All of those considerations go into it, and it does that by looking at the current state of everything that's projected to be in the environment at that time, and does propagation calculations, it does estimates of where the specific system elements are going to be located in the environment, and it then calculates and gives you a risk calculation, and the spectrum manager can then say, well, that's obviously too risky, we need a new calculation. The MICA piece is the part that enacts it. So once Oscar and Risa have talked about it, and they come to a frequency allocation, that has to get pushed out. And so the mechanism for doing that, Oscar had their own little piece that they specifically developed. The MICA piece is a more general framework. It's a controller and a client. So the radio systems have a client that talk to the controller, and that client is meant to accept a policy and implement it on the radio. The other thing it does is it provides feedback to the rest of the system, the Oscar and the Risa. It provides back things like information on where it's located, if it has the capability to monitor the spectrum, whether it's what that spectrum allocation is, or what that spectrum presence is, if there's a sensitivity that it's trying to achieve, it gives you information on the performance or the bit error rate, and it feeds that, and Oscar and Risa are supposed to use that to determine whether the risk calculations need to be recalculated and a new solution needs to be sent out to the radios. So Oscar is basically that spectrum management portion of it, the pre-planning portion primarily, and the monitoring portion in which it monitors sensors and then pushes the policy out. It requests things from Risa, and it makes requests to MICA. Risa has basically two elements. It does the risk-informed spectrum sharing, and it has its own capabilities to do situational awareness. So sensors were developed out of the Risa program to have special capabilities that incorporate some of the AI techniques I'll mention. And then MICA is that real-time action portion. Signaling is sent out from the MICA controller to the MICA client, and that forces an implementation on the actual radios, whatever they may be. And it has that feedback portion that pulls back any information that's relevant to making additional allocations or calculations of the risk back to the Risa and Oscar. Okay, so I'm primarily going to talk about Risa. Risa has these two portions. The Advanced Risk-Informed Planner, that's the portion that looks at the policies that are being created by Oscar, and they're doing their calculations. Calculations are intended to basically evaluate the risk and generate a risk score. And so risk, I'll just mention, is a calculation of probability and consequence. So the likelihood that there's going to be interference and the consequence of that interference. And that's the risk score. So that's something that gets sent back to Oscar and the spectrum planner to help them determine whether that's a good score or not. The second portion is the risk-informed sensor fusion. This is basically sensor fusion. Oscar, Ryza, and Micah talk on a common bus, and so Ryza can pull back the sensor information, or actually the information is just put on the bus. The bus then delivers the sensor information from Oscar. Ryza has its own sensors that also send its information on the bus, and it's the risk-informed sensor fusion that takes all of that information and does its own calculations based on what it's seeing. So it can do things like identify certain signals, it can do location information, other things like that, and it can send that on the bus as well. Okay, so I won't talk about this too much, other than the fact that we have these emulator services. In the emulator services, one of them we use is eMain, the extendable mobile ad hoc network emulator. It's an NRL tool, and basically for network communications, ad hoc networks, a specific model is created for radio systems, and those are put in the environment, and all the propagation characteristics are emulated in the network so that we can determine exactly what the performance of the radio is. So if you're getting interference, that has propagation up through the 7 layers of the protocol stack to the actual delivery of information and the use of it. Another tool that was built into it was NS3, a simpler simulation tool that does some basic quick calculations. So if you need a quick answer, it can go to NS3. If you can handle a longer evaluation, it can go to eMain. And both of those processes can run in parallel and continuously, so that as new information comes in, it can evaluate it and give new risk scores. And then all of that goes into the rest of the system to provide situational awareness to Oscar, and ultimately to make changes in the resulting radio systems in Micah. Oh, okay. I included this one just because it's really complex. And that's what spectrum sharing is, right? It's really complex. It doesn't do anything with respect to what actual spectrum sharing is, but you can see there's just so much going on. And that's kind of what you guys are intending to do every time you go out into the field to try to manage the spectrum. And what Riza and Oscar are trying to do are to give you machine tools that help you make those decisions better and faster. So one of the ways one of the tools AI tools that are built in is multi-swarm particle swarm optimization. So if you do a request for spectrum, and I don't really know how this works, you can correct me, obviously. But the way I'm viewing it is that someone fills out a piece of paperwork, and they say, I need this spectrum, and here's some details, and you send it into the spectrum manager, and the spectrum manager says, okay, I have a block available. Does that tell me how many radios are going to go out on the range, or where they're located, or what time they're going to be there? Do you have that information? If you do, let me know. I don't think you do. So what's happening in AI is we make some estimates of the type of network that you have, and we, for each radio network, We put them in the location, the field location that you're going to be at, and then we create particle swarms that are basically intended to be the radios that are out there, and iterate on them so that we get multiple answers to try to optimize the location where you're at. So if it turns out that in the actual spectrum environment that you're in, that you're using those locations, we have an answer for you. And that's what we're trying to do predictively. So the idea is put all of those radios out there, do a Monte Carlo analysis of those locations, get a result in terms of what the risk would be, and then evaluate that across all the population of all the answers to send a risk score back to the spectrum manager. So this just gives you some of the math. I won't go into it. So the result is this qualitative risk assessment. So the results go into eMain, the particle swarm analysis is generated, multiple answers are coming back, they're all in parallel, and then it goes through this process that ends up in a number. And the number is what goes to the spectrum manager to make a decision. So Oscar takes that, says, is it good or not? And obviously some additional knowledge needs to be attained to determine what a good score is versus not. This is based purely on math, so additional field work needs to be done. So these are the kind of rules, the processing conditions, how you get a low score, and really we tried to, the contractor we're working with had this idea, send back a number. And the idea was, well, cool, you generated a number, 85. Good, bad, I don't know. So what we really wanted them to do is say, tell us what the risk is. Is it a high risk? Is it a low risk? Is it a medium risk? And let the human decide, and then from that we can get feedback into the system to determine how to adapt the system to better use that risk score. And you can think of it somewhat like this, where the scores are on here and we can start creating these regions where an unacceptable risk score is red. The yellow gives you some, if you're really pressed and you need to have spectrum allocated, maybe you want to do an allocation in the yellow. But ideally, you want to be in the green, and there's not a whole lot of that. So the other thing that it does is contour generation. So think of this like you have your particle swarms, and they're not all nice clusters, right? When you're actually in the field, maybe you have 4 nodes in one place and 1 node over here. So it's kind of a weird shape. Most calculations are done point to point, but really it depends on all the nodes in the network to make a determination. So this risk contour is a mechanism to look at the risk scores that are coming out, the particle swarm data that we're generating, all of the performance data, and say, okay, well, we need to adapt our risk contour, that if it's outside a particular line, it may be good. And that could be a funky shape. Maybe there's a mountain there. Okay, you get an additional advantage. So this is kind of the process that goes through generating polygons and trying to find the best answer. And when you get to the lower right, you see, well, this is what a contour can be like. And that contour then tells you that as long as you're operating in that region, you can expect a risk, something to be comparable for everyone in that region. Okay, now moving on to the spectrum fusion piece. We do a generation of the common operating picture, and we share that with Oscar, and then Oscar does some of its own calculations. So the sensors are the unique piece, sort of, to what we're doing in this portion, and so it generates data descriptors. The sensors themselves are kind of standard spectrum processing hardware, USRPs, but the processor that's connected to them are ORN processors. So they're graphics processors that have multiple pipelines for analysis. And that gives us the ability to do AI training for those pipeline processes to eventually be able to detect specific signals. Do we have a comprehensive list of all the spectrum, all the signals that we would be detecting? No. This is an R&D project. We have a few. One of them is 5G. The other was a training waveform. Since the AWS-3 SARTA program was focused on the 1780 to 1850, that's what we focused on. So what's happening? So there are two things that we can use. We can use I and Q data, and we can use spectrograms, basically. And one of them is kind of an image processing technique. The other is more of a data-driven technique. And so convolutional neural networks are used to provide deep learning. And the idea is to eventually end up with the green dots at the output that give us specific signals that we're looking for. And so that training data, if you've heard about AI at all, training data is kind of a key, because you have all kind of environments. If you have a signal that you just capture every day in the same environment and you put through the system, you're training it to one specific situation. If you okay, sorry. But really what you want to do is train your data to your convolutional neural network to any situation that can be in. So different noise situations, different interference situations, different signal level situations. And once it has all that training, that it can give you better information on how to identify that signal. This gives you a little bit more on the convolutional neural network, which I'm not going to go through. You'll have the slide. It's all basically, you can go to Wikipedia and find the same thing. And what you get is, so the AI ML has certain advantages and disadvantages with respect to standard processing techniques. So because we have graphic processors, we can create pipelines using standard techniques, standard signal processing techniques, as well as the AI techniques. And then it can vote on that at the end to come up with whether it identifies a signal as the signal that all of them agree on or most of them agree on. This just gives you a little bit of idea from the image processing use of the convolutional neural network. Very high level, but basically if you take a picture and you're trying to identify the man, you can train that in different environments. Same thing with a spectrogram. And this is where the data fusion occurs. So different information you're going to need. You'd like to know what the signal is. You'd like to know what frequency it's using, where it's located. And all of that is something that you may be able to obtain from your sensors, or it may be something that's augmented by feedback from the MICA clients that are out there saying, hey, I'm really here. So instead of trying to passively geolocate a particular signal in space, the actual signal generator can send feedback back and say, hey, I'm here, so when you're doing your analysis, use me at this location. And in summary, this is a system of systems. I think we've talked about words like that before. So basically, when you think of the Oscar presentation, Oscar really is at the hub of this. Oscar is the piece that is all the pieces that you can build on. Ryza and Mica are additional pieces that provide additional functionality. You are using a common bus. So the idea is to, as Andrew said earlier in the day, you can run it locally on a server. You can run it, kind of regionally. You can put it in the cloud. And all the tools are just meant to coordinate with each other and talk to each other so that, you have the tool set that can be expanded and extended. The artificial intelligence techniques, a lot of them are not as mature as the whole Oscar system. Still work in progress, but we made a lot of progress in demonstrating that we can generate valid risk scores and that can help tune how the spectrum is allocated in space. And then automation is a piece that the RISA function can be, actually all of the things can run continuously, but if you're doing an evaluation of the risk score, that can be happening continuously because all it is processing time. So for a particular exercise, that processing time can just continually process and keep spitting out scores with respect to risk, kind of like a speedometer. You say, is my risk good? Yes, it is. Are there other AI techniques? Yeah, plenty of things that could be extended into this, with the goal being to have a spectrum management system that, through the addition of all these techniques, gives the spectrum manager and the spectrum operator and the system operator in the field the ability to look at that data and make real-time decisions. And so it's a decision aid process that we're providing, and plenty of work that can continue on with it. So I'm done. Any questions? And I only went 5 minutes over, so not so bad. Okay, thanks.
Well, team, we are right on time because we have actually allocated a few extra minutes to get us all caught up. But nonetheless, we're going to use our break time to actually get us back on track. So we're going to begin our break now until 12:30 local time. So be prepared this afternoon. We got a couple of briefs. Started with NMSC. That's going to be a virtual briefer. So request for everybody's being on time and keeping the conversations low so we can actually allow them to go ahead and cover the material from NMSC. So spectrum certification, if that's in your wheelhouse, please be early and have some questions for the two. Other than that, have a good rest of the afternoon. See you back at 12:30.